Xavier from APLF in Hong Kong.
And I'm Rose. We are the hosts of today's webinar.
Yeah, if you are first time here, I would like to welcome you. And if you have attended our webinar last week, I would like to say thanks to your support and to be with us again. I hope you are all staying safe and sound no matter which country are you in, whether you're watching this webinar at home or office. We're glad to see the pandemic is cooling down. It has forced us to change the way we live and to work, but we have to stay connected. And this is the best time to share and learn. In the following weeks, we will invite different speakers from leather and fashion industry to share their viewpoints. So please stay tuned to our websites and social media platforms.
Feel free to check with all the panelists and attendees in the chat room. You can select from the drop-down menu. If you have any questions, please type in the Q&A box. You will see this icon at the bottom of the screen, and we will reply you in the Q&A section.
So today we have a great honor to have Luca and Fabiana from UNIC, the Italian Tennis Association, to be the speaker. UNIC is one of the most important associations in the leather industry. They represent a strategic industry which is a fundamental component of today's Italy's manufacturing and economics. So let's welcome Luca and Fabiana.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can I see your face?
Yes, I'm trying.
Yes.
Here we are.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Luca and Fabiana,
Good morning.
yeah, I heard that in Italy you can go out for a coffee, have a walk in the park now. So the situation is cooling down right now. So are the tanneries continuing their work? Is there any influences to you guys? So shall we begin your presentation?
Okay, yes, for sure. And during our presentation, we will go through the recent situation that we are facing here in Italy during the coronavirus emergency. For sure, we will focus on the situation of the tanning industry, and we will give you a presentation about our protocol, about the health and safety measure that have been decided here in Italy for all the economic activities and in particular for the tanning activities. So I will make an introduction about the situation, and then I will pass the microphone to my colleague Fabiana Orlandi of the environmental department of UNIC. So I'm starting to share the presentation. Okay, can you see it? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. So just to start, but first let me thank you, APLF, for inviting us to this webinar. We think it is a very important moment for our industry, and it is essential for the whole leather community to share the best practices and the measures that we all are taking in our country in order to tackle this new challenge called coronavirus. So I just start with a very brief presentation of UNIC. UNIC was founded in 1946, and UNIC is the private non-profit organization officially representing the tanning industry at national and international level. Our industry is composed by nearly 1,200 companies with 70,000 employees, more or less. Our role is to promote the interest of Italian tanneries and represent it at every level. And we foster the innovation of the industry, and we enhance its social and environmental role. And for sure, we provide services to our companies. We are based in Milan, but we have also some branch offices in the three main tanning districts in Italy: in Arzignano, in Veneto region, Santa Croce in Tuscany, and Solofra near Avellino in Campania region. UNIC is part of a group, is part of UNIC-Lineapelle Group. composed by UNIC, the Association of Italian Tanneries, Lineapelle, that deals with fairs and promotion mainly, and composed by also ICEC, a certification institute specialized in the leather business. So after this short introduction, I will give you some information about the situation of the Italian leather industry during the coronavirus emergency. As you have probably seen from the media, Italy is one of the countries that has been mostly affected by the coronavirus. Our first official case of COVID-19 is dated February 21st, even if we are reading that probably the virus was present in our country even before. And now, 2.5 months later, the figures about the virus are absolutely dramatic. I mean, we have recorded more than 200,000 people infected and more than 28,000 people died because of the virus. Fortunately, in the last 3 weeks, we have seen all the virus statistical trends on the decrease, and for sure this is an optimistic. This gives us an optimistic view for the next weeks. For sure, we have to monitor the situation in order to see if the virus spreading is going down, or, well, we cross the finger not. There will be a reprise in the next month. The government has, well, taken some measure in the last 2.5 months because of the virus. There has been a gradual lockdown for all the people, started since March 14th, and for industrial companies since March 25th. After this day, only some essential activities were permitted here in Italy. Tanneries, like many other industrial activities in Italy, have been closed. Were closed on March 25th, and the companies were allowed to continue only some secondary operations, like machinery maintenance, preservation of raw material, shipments of goods already finished. And this was the situation for nearly 1 month. Then we started to talk about the reopening. For sure, reopening according to the fact that, as I said, the statistical figures of the coronavirus spreading have started to show some decrease. So from April 27th, so from last week, export-oriented companies could recover activities, and this is also the case of Italian tanneries, because I would say that, well, almost all the Italian tanneries are export-oriented. Some directly, because they export directly the finished leather, some through indirect export. I mean, this means they sell leather to Italian manufacturers of leather products, so notably shoes, bags, and so on, and these goods are then exported. Anyway, from yesterday, from Monday 4th May, almost all the manufacturing industry have reopened officially, and that includes all the fashion supply systems and for sure all the tanneries. So the industry has officially reopened yesterday. We have tried to monitor during these weeks the economic effect of the virus. For sure, we have collected the data analysis information produced by many analysts focused on the fashion and the design and the automotive sectors. And we have drafted some estimates about the impact, the negative impact of the virus for our industry. We are right now estimating that the annual turnover of our industry could lose 1/4 of the value during this year, and this negative effect will hit all the segments, all the districts, and all the main geographical destination of our industry. We estimate that we will probably lose at the end of the year 30% of our sale in the European Union, 20-25% of the sale in China, while US are still unpredictable right now because the spreading of the virus is still very hot in the US, so the situation is constantly on the move. If we see our fashion client, well, from the information we have right now, from the single brand, from the sectors, well, figures say that probably the top ranges will lose 20-30% of their sale at the end of the year, due to a fall of 30-50% in the first semester. And these are more or less the same figures that we are seeing also on the upholstery client sector like automotive industry and furniture industry. For sure, these are negative figures that comes after a period that is notably last year, 2019, that was not very brilliant for the leather market, notably here in Europe. So the virus, unfortunately, has stopped any possibility to recover from a weak market situation that was previously experienced by our industry. But I think that the question that everybody has on their table is the consumer's demand, because for sure we can restart activities, we can reopen the factories, we can try to come back to the reality, to the good old times, I would say, but for sure the market will go back to roll as usual only when consumers will be allowed to get back to their normal behavior in terms, for sure, of consumption. Online consumption has increased a lot, for sure. Well, it is quite logic in the last weeks, in the last month, but the impact is cannot balance the fact that people cannot get out from the houses and get back to the normal shopping. So we are, I think, everybody is wondering when we will get back to a normal situation about consumption. So, just concluded this I would say general economic and general situation introduction about the situation here in Italy, and we will concentrate about the core of this webinar, that is the presentation of the UNIC protocol on the health and safety measure implemented by Italian tanneries in order to tackle the coronavirus. This is very important because for sure economic activities can reopen, but drafting and drawing dedicated health and safety measures in the working place is absolutely an essential element to contrast the spreading of the coronavirus. This is absolutely vital for us to get back to reality. So industrial companies are requested to adopt this measure in order to continue, if they have not stopped, activities, or to recover activities in the last weeks. A short, I would say, a short list of the main measure that has been taken on this concern in the last weeks in Italy are listed in this slide. On 14th of March, Confindustria, that is the confederation of the Italian industry, so not only about tanning, but generally all the economic the industrial activities here in Italy, signed an health and safety protocol with the General Trade Union. And this protocol was compulsory for all economic activities here in Italy. On April 21st, UNIC, we and the labor trade unions of the tanneries workers signed a first protocol on the health and safety measure specific for the tanning industry. This was done mainly in the view of the reopening. We wanted to be ready once that we were allowed to reopen to have a pragmatic and efficient protocol to give to our tanneries in order that they can comply with the compulsory regulation on this concern that has been decided in Italy. Then two days after, Confindustria and the general labor trade unions updated their protocol, because in the meanwhile, in the weeks before, some regulation was taken in Italy, both at national and at regional level. So they felt that they needed to update the protocol in order to comply to this. And this protocol has a binding nature. This protocol is like a compulsory regulation for all the activity. Following that, on May 1st, we also updated our protocol with our labor trade unions. And this is the protocol that we are now presenting to you. This is just the first page of our protocol. It was signed by us and the labor trade unions, Filstem CGL, FEMCA CISL, and Wiltec WIL. It is based, as I said, on the Confindustria binding protocol, plus a number of documents about COVID-19 issued by Italian and international health authorities, plus for sure, we added our sectoral expertise in order to implement this measure inside the tanning working place. The document is 21 pages long, composed by 16 chapters and 6 attachments. Okay, I finished my introduction and I pass the microphone to Fabiana for the presentation of the protocol. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. After the business introduction and the business overview, now let's go into the details of the provision, the technical provision of a UNIC protocol. Before to start with the technical details, it's important to underline that our protocol is a sort of guidelines. It's not mandatory for tanneries, but it is a useful guideline to assist Italian tanneries in adopting their own safety protocol, because what is mandatory is the adoption of a company's anti-contagion protocol. A key element of our protocol, and of course of each protocol, is the reduction of the risk of people gathering. That is the main risk. And considering this, this factor, the tanneries was considered by Italian government as an activity with low risk about people gathering. Of course, during the tannery activities, some situations are possible in which more frequent and close contacts can have place. And so in these cases, specific prevention and protection measures are foreseen. Let's now come into detail of the sections of our protocol. The first 3 sections are dedicated to the structure, the organizational structure of committees. Our protocol foresees 3 committees at national, local, and company level. All of these 3 protocols are, all these 3 committees are joint committee. because they are composed by employers or, of course, they representatives, and trade unions or workers representative. The role of National Joint Committee is to coordinate the adoption of the UNIC protocol at national level, and also updating the protocol and collecting and sharing the best practices to tanneries. At the local level, the committee is a sort of consultant committee that can be invited to participate to company committee in the case in the company the committee is not created. But the most important committee is, of course, the company committee, because it is the structure, it is the subject composed by the employer and the company's health and safety service, workers representatives, and also the competent doctor. And this committee is has to support the employers for implementing and applying the protocol in the company. The following sections describe the practical health and safety measures, starting by information and training. Information is a very important measure, because it's vital that employees, but not only, also all people can enter to the company to know what is the regulation that is in place in company, but also what are the rules to come into the company. And so the employers have to inform all workers and anyone entering to the tannery about the regulation in force, and also about the precautionary measures provided by the protocol, the company's protocol. This information is transmitted prior to the resumption of activities and also integrated in detail before starting the work. What are the contents of this information? Of course, most important, the behaviors to be adopted during the working activities, and also which are the contacts, the referent persons into company, which can give to workers information and details about the provision of the protocol and of the measures against the spread of COVID-19. Also, the information transmits information about the using of PPE, a very most important measure to protect workers. And also, what are the procedures for self-monitoring and management of possible COVID-19 symptoms, like, for example, how to and when measure fever and so on. It's forbidden, and it's important that workers know this provision. It's forbidden for employees to come into company if they have symptoms, or if they come from risk areas, or have been in contact with positive persons. Our protocol foresees also specific training section for trainers and for workers that are exposed to a major risks. For example, people, if there is people that have to measure the temperature before the entrance into the company, of course, these people need for a training, a specific training section. The most important measure in a company, but not only in a company, of course, in everyday activities in order to prevent the spread of coronavirus is, as you know, the safety distance. It's very, very, very important, and also all the protocol have this central measure as the main provision. It's very important to keep a big distance between people, and this distance is preferably 2 meters, and in any case has to be not less than 1 meter. 2 meters because 2 meters is the distance that define the close contact, for example, in the case of contagion. But 1 meter is absolutely the less distance after which workers and the people in general have to use, for example, PPI, or has to adopt other measures. So to respect this distance, workplace spacing measures are adopted. Also rethinking the layout of companies where, or of course, where if possible, and also using horizontal signs in order to indicate to workers exactly which are the position of working. Also, keeping the right distance is not mandatory only for employees or for internal people, but also for external people, and also for each space internal in the company, like common spaces, toilets, changing rooms, relaxing room, and so on. So also for as we said before, external people. But the safety measure starting just before the enter of the employees into the tannery, because in order to avoid the spread of the coronavirus, people who access to the company spaces should dress surgical masks before entering, and better also before also just exit, for example, its own car. Employees are required to check their own temperature daily before leaving home, and of course, as we said before, it is mandatory in the case of fever of other flu symptoms to stay at home and call family doctor or competent health authority in order to declare its situation. Also, to avoid gatherings, even when traveling to or from the tannery, employees are invited to use their own means of transport. In this phase 2 of coronavirus, it's important, and it's not sure to use public transport in the meantime. So the measure, wherever is possible, is to use private transports in order to avoid situation of gatherings. For those of higher risks of COVID-19, for example, due to specific diseases, or for example, because the age, because the coronavirus is mainly affects mainly person after 60 years old, and so on. The return to work will be assessed by the competent doctor. So to admit this person to the working activity are a sort of permit by the competent doctor needs. The next one, please. Okay, we talked about the entrance of external people into the tannery. Of course, they have to follow the same provisions of internal employees, but also they are also informed about the safety measures adopted in the tanneries. They must wear surgical masks and also gloves. It's preferable. And for they are dedicated toilets and also entrance, because it is necessary to exclude as it's possible to have the same paths, or to create a distance between external and internal people. The employees of other companies have to comply, of course, with the protocol measures, and in this case, for tanneries, it's important to have some documents signed by the external people. For the tannery staff that can be in contact with the external person is required to wear not only surgery mask, but also protective gloves and glasses, in addition to the mask, because it's important to protect them more strictly. Another important measure is the cleaning and then sanitization of workspaces. First of all, it's important before the resumption of production activities that tanneries cleans accurately the working rooms and the working places. In some cases, it can be necessary also to provide a sanitization of the workspace, but not only in all companies. In any case, cleaning and sanitization at least twice per work shift is important, is very important for heavy objects or space that is frequently used or touched. For example, handles, buttons, open devices, and of course toilets. Of course, if there are cases of COVID-19 inside the tannery after reopening, extraordinary cleaning and sanitization will be carried out by a specialized company following the instruction of authorities. With the cleaning and then sanitization of the spaces, of course, it's very important the personal hygienic the personal hygienic measures. And in this case, to help this activity for workers, are an adequate number of protective, an adequate number of installation of disinfectants and so on will be installed into specific space. Also, an adequate number of protective masks will be provided to each employees, because PPI are very important, especially when the safe distance is less than 1 meter, and there are no alternative solutions in order to move, for example, the working space. In particular, it is necessary, if the distance is less than 1 meter, to use separation between people, for example, physical barriers or visors, or using PPE such FFP2 masks or equivalent, and other protective device. In particular, gloves are particularly recommended to reception staff during loading, unloading, and goods, and in handling paper documents. Of course,
Fabiana, yeah, sorry, I just interrupt you for a second just to underline, because this is a very important passage of the whole protocol. Because we underlined that people inside the tannery needs to keep a distance of a minimum 1 meter. And we have seen that, by the way, in a tannery premises, there isn't such a high risk of gathering people very close. But there are some operations that require that people works at a distance that is less than 1 meter. So the protocol does not say that you cannot be closer to a person for a distance that is minor to 1 meter. But in these particular cases, yes, it is necessary to use I would say a further precaution, like, as you said, the separation and other PPE. I think that everybody knows what PPE stands for. Is a personal protective equipment that does masks and so on. So you are allowed to stay close to one of your colleagues for less than 1 meter, but you have to, for sure, be more precautional about that, and use further protection. This is a very, very important passage of the whole protocol.
Yes, thank you, Luca, for your integration. Of course, the safety measures for that are foreseen for the working spaces are extend also to common areas like a canteen, changing rooms, relaxation areas, smoking areas, and so on. Also because the areas has a high risk to have gatherings, and so it's important to ensure spacing. For example, adopting measures such as the staggering breaks by department and work areas, or extending the canteen opening hours and shortening the stay times, for example. It's very important the continuous ventilation of the rooms, natural where it is possible. And in the case of mechanical ventilation systems, this system have to move air through a motor fan 20 hours continuously, so 20 hours for 7 days. Also, in the case of mechanical ventilation systems, the periodic sanitization and daily cleaning of common areas of these plant are required, and of course also the sanitization and daily cleaning of common areas. Quickly to the business organization, that is another most important measure in order to avoid gathering, because the tannery has to minimize the presence, the contemporary presence of workers. And one of the measures is the using smart working, of course, where possible, and also proceed to with a gradual resumption of activities, and where it's possible, as last measure, the repositioning of workplaces, of course, adequately spaced from each other. Also, of course, national and international business trips are suspended in order to avoid the movement of workers, except for proven but absolutely necessary work needs. To protect the worker and the level of the life standard of workers. Also, social safety nets need to be evaluated in case of inactive employees. For the entry and exit of workers, we said some information before. Some other measures are put in place to avoid gatherings. For example, creating multiple accesses to the site for the entrance and also the exit of workers. And also the measure to ensure the maintenance of distance and facilitate any checks, specialized or horizontal signs or equivalent distancing systems are used. If company layout make it possible, there are also reserved routes for the entry and exit of work, and so separate routes for the two movement of workers. Of course, internal movements, meetings, and events are stopped where possible, and also movement between working areas should be limited to the strictly necessary cases in order to avoid gathering. Live meetings, of course, are not permitted, and it is mandatory where possible to use remote connection tools and conference calls. In the case of live meetings that need to be organized, of course, it's very important to respect the safety distance of 2 meters better, or at least 1 meter. The two last sections are dedicated to the sanitary, to the health measure for people, in particularly for the management of symptomatic person, and to other measures provided by the competent doctors. Of course, in case of symptoms during the working activities, workers must immediately report any onset of illness, like fever, cough, breathing difficulties, and so on, and the company should isolate the person with symptoms in a dedicated room that has been previously identified and kept with natural ventilation, and also immediately proceeds to notify the competent health authorities, because this is procedures that are provided by authorities. If the worker, after the controls by authorities, if the worker is found positive to COVID-19, of course, the company should collaborate with the health authorities to identify any close contacts. So contacts with a distance less than 2 meters for more than 15 minutes long. And during the investigation period, also the company can ask, as a preventive measure, can ask workers who have had close contacts with the positive person to leave the plant as a precaution, according to the indication of the health authorities. The role of the competent doctor is very important, also because coronavirus is an important health risk. And so the competent doctor mainly works in the company applying the indication of the health authorities, but also collaborates in defining the contents of information and training. He integrates and proposes prevention measures related to COVID-19 disease, and reports situations and manage situation of current or previous fragility of employees. In the event of a reintegration of a person previously infected by COVID-19, the competent doctor acquires a specific health certificate that states the negative swab result, and then submits the work to a preventive medical examination before the reintegration to work. Last but not least, in order to communicate how the Tanneries is managing this emergency, and how Tannery he's implementing the measure of prevention and of safety of its workers. UNIC has create a new certification standard in order to attest the adoption of a management system of COVID-19 emergency for Italian leather sector companies, pursuing the suitable health and safety measures and provision included in the anti-contagion company protocol. UNIC is the Institute of Quality Certification for the leather sector based in Italy. And now it is the first certification body that has developed this type of standard. The reference of this new certification in the technical specification TS 422. And as I said before, the certification guarantees customers and stakeholders about the compliance of the company protocol to regulations, so to laws, of course, but also if Tanneries adopted it to UNIC protocol. I finish. Thank you, Luca, and thank you all for your attention. If you have questions, we are here.
Yeah, thank you both, Luca and Fabiana. Here are some of the questions that the floor would like to ask. First one is for Fabiana. And indeed, let me have a look. Is there any check or test need to be done for the life of virus on wet glue or finished leather?
Not yet. Also because there are no information about the time on which coronavirus can survive on different types of materials. Of course, I think that in the case of positive person of COVID-19, a good practice, but also a preventive measure that the company can put in place is to put the material that was in contact or that was touched or handled by this worker is isolated in a dedicated space for at least 2 days. I think that is a good timing in order to be sure that on the that the coronavirus can dead definitely before a new handling and also before sending to the clients or so on.
Yeah, because one of the attendees also worry about whether the protocol adjusts the spread of the virus through the leather, because you know many people are handling for the leather.
Yes, of course, but in general, there are no, it depends what activities the person positive was doing. Also because if the person was in the first steps, in the first stages of the process, of course, the quantity of the materials potentially contaminated has higher. Instead, if the possible positive case on a phase of the end phase, like storage or sending, was less. And so the important is that every activities and every worker's activity is mapped in order to can describe and to can identify exactly what materials they touched and need to put into isolation.
Okay, and is there any suggested procedure if someone external person want to visit a tanneries or factory who is having a fever, send him out or just call some of the authorities? If someone is having a fever and then try to go to the factory or tannery to have a visit. He
or she cannot enter, of course, into the tannery, and it's necessary in this case to contact the authority in order to have the check and the sanitary check in order to confirm or not if the fever is caused by coronavirus or not.
Yeah, yeah. And is there any minimal standard of the masks in the workplace, or the government will give them, the workers, some of the masks?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is there any minimum standard for the mask that the workers can use?
Which kind? See, Fabiana, which kind of mask? Yeah, which kind of mask?
Yeah, what kind of mask?
Okay. of course, the mask that the worker need to dress, need to have before entering, at least should be a surgical mask, because this surgical mask has 3 layers of materials that can protect not workers from the droplets of coronavirus, but if all workers are using these masks, they prevent they prevent the spread of any virus or any how can I say, macrobiological contaminants to the environment. And so it's important to use this type of masks before the entrance into the tannery. And as Luca underlined before, if the safety distance is less than 1 meter, of course, you need to use a protective equipment that is protective also against the external agents, and so you need masks, for example, with a different composition and certified for protection against biological agents and viruses in particular.
Yeah, in this particular cases, we recommend to use an FFP2 mask, so a mask with a protection factor at minimum 2 or 3 for sure, or a visors, you know, like plastic visors. You can use the surgical mask and the plastic virus so that you are, I'm going to say, protected from the droplets that come from possibly from other person. Surgical mask protects the others. Okay, if I have the virus or if I am positive, while FFP2 protects myself. If everybody wears a surgical mask, there is okay. It's quite a safe situation. But in order to be safer, for sure, if the distance is less than 1 meter, we recommend to use visor and surgical mask or FFP2 mask and glasses.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, please.
Here are some of the questions regarding how to protect the ladder. For example, do you recommend any chemical spray or some treatment, or for example, ironing then can help for this virus?
Oh. Ironing can help because high temperature, of course, kill the virus. But there are no sprays or some chemicals that you can use, because the products that you can use for sanitization, for example, cannot be used to sanitize leather, because of course they can damage the articles, and so they cannot be used. We cannot use to use. You cannot imagine to use, for example, alcohols or other substances on the surface of leather. The main measure in the case, but I repeat, only in the case of positive infection of the coronaviruses in the tannery, is the quarantine of the materials for at least 2 days. Also because we are speaking about viruses, not bacterials. And so the characteristics and the difference between viruses and bacteria is that various viruses can survive only in a host, and so it remain in the environment and on the surfaces a very limited period, instead of bacteria that instead can survive for a long time, also for years. This is
Okay, yeah. I think the time is running out, and thank you both of you for the Q&A answers, and we will continue to have some information about our upcoming webinars.
Yes, I think
Okay.
it's very,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much. I just saying that if somebody else has some question about the protocol, about the health and safety measure in Italy, about the situation in Italy, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will upload this webinar to our APLF YouTube channel for your sharing as well. And in the next week, we have invited the Walmart company to release their seasonal sourcing guide. So simply scan the QR code, and you may also find the link in the chat box. Thank you so much. Don't forget to complete the survey and let us know the topics you are interested in, and we will invite the experts in the future. So you can click exit the webinar and it will direct you to the survey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.